Hey, what's going on, everybody? Back again today to talk about something pretty relevant in the Marvel world. Pretty soon, we're going to be getting a live action film adaptation of The Eternals in the MCU. Now, the trailer looks pretty good. The trailers that I've seen, they definitely have me interested. I'm definitely going to be going to see this, like, when it comes out in the theater, provided the theaters are allowing people in. The Eternals looks like it's going to be setting the stage for where we're going to be going in this next chapter of the MCU. The first they're calling everything that we've had so far was the Infinity Saga all the way up till Endgame, and now we're starting to build up to the next big thing. The multiverse is a thing now, and between Loki and what we've seen in the Spider-Man Far From Home, or not Far From Home, No Way Home trailer, the multiverse it's in effect, it's going. And I'm interested in that and the Eternals, because the Eternals are where we start to get deep into the like cosmic deep space stuff with Marvel, the real mythology of it. Up until this point, it's all been traditional superhero comic book stuff. But when it comes to both Marvel and DC, the two oldest superhero mythologies that there are, they really are mythologies when you get into it. Of course, most people get into it with the basic superhero stuff, good guys in costumes fighting bad guys in costumes, and they have powers and abilities and stuff like that. But both with DC and with Marvel, there is a mythology at it. There's a creation myth and all this kind of stuff that goes along with it. Marvel's, and coincidentally enough, they're both by the same author, Jack Kirby, Jack the King Kirby. A lot of people, I've been watching a lot of people's videos online on YouTube and just in forums and stuff, and a lot of people are kind of like, it seems a little wrong that we are going to be getting an Eternals movie before a New Gods or Jack Kirby's Fourth World movie. They're both mythologies, both pantheons, whatever you want to call them. They're compared to each other quite often because they're both considered like the equivalent of each other, but for Marvel and DC, and they are coincidentally created by the same person. The New Gods came first. Jack Kirby, for one reason or another, you can look up. There's plenty of documentaries and stuff that talk about why he got fed up with Marvel, and he went over to DC, and DC gave him. They were like, we got the king, we got Jack Kirby. Let him do what he wants. He's a genius, and he created the Fourth World, the world of the New Gods, Apocalypse, New Genesis, characters like Darkseid. Like, he created Darkseid, Orion, Highfather, Calabac, Steppenwolf, Lightray, Forager, all these. It was supposed to be Kirby's way of doing, like, I want to tell my own mythology. I want to create my own mythology, similar to like Norse mythology and Greek mythology, but I want it to be my own thing. And that is really where the biggest difference between the two come into play. When he created New Gods in the Fourth World for DC, he did it pretty much as its own thing. It was not originally intended to be part of the greater DC universe storyline. At least that's not how Kirby really intended it. Of course, DC did their own thing, and it didn't take them long to be like, oh, Darkseid's a great villain. He's the epitome of evil. Let's put him as a main DC villain so we can use him in stories, have other DC heroes, Superman, the Justice League, fight Darkseid. Well, eventually Kirby went back to Marvel, and he created the Eternals. And this is the trade paperback that collects all 19 issues plus the annual #1 of Jack Kirby's original Eternals series. It features, and here's the thing, both with New Gods and the Fourth World, as with Eternals, Kirby did everything. He did the art, he did the story, the writing. The only thing he didn't do, I believe, let's see here. The comics were inked by someone else. John Verpoorten, colored by Glennis Wine. So he didn't really do the coloring and the inking, but the original artwork and the story, it's all Kirby. And you can definitely tell that in here. It's very Kirby-esque, the art style, the writing. It definitely, if you were just reading these and you had no idea who wrote them, you would guess Jack Kirby. Now, like I said though, the difference is when he made Eternals for Marvel, he did it with the idea that like this is set in the Marvel universe. And the biggest indicator of that is you look at New Gods and the Fourth World, that stuff takes place in another area of cosmic space on two other completely different planets, not Earth, you know? So even if it was originally set in the DC universe, there's not much really signaling that in the story. It takes place far away. The Eternals takes place entirely on Earth, and in a couple locations, but you know it's on Earth from the get-go. It starts out on Earth. They're on Earth quite a lot, and towards the end of it, some other Marvel characters show up. Like Hulk shows up in here. Icarus fights the Hulk. So it was very clear from the get-go, this takes place in the Marvel universe. And a lot of people have said, like, you know, it's weird, like, the Eternals, nothing Kirby creates was bad. But the Eternals have always just been kind of like this really sidelined pantheon of characters from the Marvel universe that, like, yeah, they're there and they pop up every now and then and do some stuff. But really, the only real thing that came out of him doing the Eternals that had a real long-term effect on the Marvel Universe was the Celestials. And we've seen those in the Eternals trailer. The big red dude with they look like eyes. He's got like 6 eyes going down his head. That's one of the Celestials. We also got a brief look at one in the movie Guardians of the Galaxy when the Collector is explaining to them what Infinity Stones are. You see one of the Celestials, he's got his staff, and it's got the Power Stone in it, and he uses it to like wipe out a planet. That was a Celestial as well. The Celestials have a lasting effect on the Marvel, not just the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but the Marvel Universe as a whole, because the Celestials are what created life. That's their deal. These big celestial god entities of space, they go around, and it's kind of like raising sea monkeys in an aquarium. They go around, they seed planets with different forms of life, and they're basically doing like biology experiments, and they come back in waves over time, look in on the experiments, see how it's going, make adjustments here and there. That's the Celestials deal, and that has echoed throughout the Marvel universe since he created them. They've come up again and again. There's actually a good saga of the Thor comic book where he interacts with the Eternals and the Celestials. They are a big deal in Marvel. The Eternals, though, they're just kind of these sideline characters. They are powerful. They cannot die. It's not even just like they're immortal. They are eternal. Like, if you stab an Eternal in the heart, like, he might go down and be like, eh. But the minute you take the fucking weapon out of his chest, he's going to heal and get right back up. Like, they literally cannot die. They can always come back. That's the whole point of them being Eternals. They're like the most pure form of life that there is. But for all that, for all their power and their eternal nature, they cannot die. They cannot cease to exist. They have a very limited interaction with the greater Marvel universe. And that's one thing that also people have been kind of saying about this video, about this new movie. They're like, where were the Eternals, these powerful beings? Why didn't they help fight Thanos and this and that? And in the trailer, like, what is his name? Kit Harington's character, he's going to be Black Knight. He even asked one of them, like, where were you guys? Why didn't you help with Thanos or anything else? And her response is like, we were instructed to only get involved if it involved deviants. Deviants they're like the anti-Eternals. They're like, the Eternals are not, the Celestials. The Celestials, they created Eternals, mankind, and deviants. And deviants are like these weird, grotesque mutations. They have, their genetic structure is not stable. Why the Celestials made them, I don't know. We don't know. We're not supposed to know. Why do gods do what gods do? We don't know. They're gods. We can't fathom their reasoning. That's what makes them gods. So she's like, yeah, we were only instructed to intervene or interact if the situation involved deviance in some way, this other race. And Thanos, for those of you who know, It hasn't quite been established in the MCU, but in terms of the Marvel Comics universe, Thanos is a deviant. He's a descendant of a deviant. That's why he looks the way he looks, and he's got the wrinkly chin and shit. He has deviant blood in him. So a lot of people, like Marvel fans who know the universe and the mythos, they're kind of like, Thanos kind of justifies as a deviant situation. The Eternals should have gotten involved. Maybe, but them not showing up in the MCU throughout everything that's gone on all the way up till now, it kind of fits with the comic book lore. They're just kind of there, you know? And it really contrasts the New Gods and the Fourth World, because as we've seen, not through Kirby's design, but through DC's design overall, the New Gods of Apocalypse and New Genesis, they get involved in the greater goings-on of the DC universe all the time. Hell, Orion has been part of the Justice League at times. He's interacted with them regularly. So a lot of people are kind of like, what is this Eternal shit? So I'm going to tell you right now, if you want more Eternals, more background information, what to know, reading Jack Kirby's original series is a good place to start. However, if you watch my review of Frank Miller's Daredevil run, I talk about how the writing and the dialogue is a little dated. You know, it's just, people don't talk this way anymore, and because of that, comic book writers don't typically write this way. So it is a little old school. But I do like the classic artwork, and I think that really makes up for a lot of it. I'm dealing with the writing, and I'm finding the story engaging. You know, I like stuff like this. Mythologies with pantheons of gods and demigods and stuff like that. I'm a big fan of that kind of stuff, and that's basically what this is. It just it's directly implemented into the Marvel universe. So, yeah, I mean, it's not bad. But if, you know, old school stuff is not your cup of tea, then there is an alternative to this. However, I do recommend you read this. You can find that pretty much any comic book store on Amazon. Also, the next best thing, if you want a more modern take on the Eternals, we have Eternals, written by Neil Gaiman. This is a 7-issue comic book series that's been collected into this one trade paperback. You can see here it's not that thick. It's got art by John Romita Jr. If you've read Kick-Ass, he's done work on Kick-Ass, Spider-Man, Superman. You're probably somewhat familiar with his artwork if you're a comic book fan. And I like his artwork. I think it also is Kirby-esque in a lot of ways, but it's still his own unique style. And this features the Eternals. It updates them for the modern era. And it also includes much more involvement by a lot more Marvel characters. Iron Man is in here. Let's see who else, just by flipping through it. Iron Man shows up in here. Might just be Iron Man. Oh, Yellow Jacket. Trying to remember. But yeah, this is kind of like Neil Gaiman and John Romita Jr. got together to kind of revamp the Eternals for the modern age, and that's what this is. If I had to take a guess as to what is really going to be the foundation of inspiration for this Eternals movie, I'm going to go with, it's hard to say. I would really recommend reading both of these. If you read both of these, I think you're probably pretty set for this upcoming movie. But it's hard to say because, yeah, this is the more modern take, which makes sense. It makes you think they would use more of this stuff for the movie. But at the same time, you know, there's that whole thing with Jack Kirby, and how his work was underappreciated and he never really got the credit he was due during his day. Stan Lee is really remembered as like the big daddy godfather of Marvel. Jack Kirby was right there with him the whole way. Jack Kirby deserves just as much credit as Stan Lee. And because of that, I could really see them using this Eternals movie to pay homage to Jack Kirby's vision of them. So I personally think this movie is going to be a mesh of both the classic Kirby OG stuff and the more modernized Neil Gaiman stuff. So yeah, now I want to kind of dive into the whole debate about like the Eternals versus the New Gods. I don't know, you know, it's like, I've never read Jack Kirby's original Fourth World saga. I've only ever sampled comic book material of the New Gods, more modern stuff. And of course, they feature heavily in the DCAU, the Superman, the animated series, and then on into Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. The New Gods are there, Darkseid's there. So that's really my take about them. Now, I do think that for how big of a bad guy Darkseid is, he gets thrown in pretty easily. You know, they're pretty quick to be like, use Darkseid, have the Justice League fight Darkseid. I mean, with the New 52, that's how the Justice League came to be. Their very first time assembling, fighting a villain together, was an invasion by Apocalypse led by Darkseid. I don't remember hating it, but looking back on it now in hindsight, I kind of think about it like, man, they really blew their Darkseid load real quick. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't pace themselves at all. So, yeah, it's really just, it's how much you like this kind of stuff and how much you want it to be part of the main universe. With what they're doing with the MCU and how everything is a part of everything, it all connects, it all fits together, it makes sense that they would move into Eternals. Eternals, like I said, moves us into space, introduces some of the more greater cosmic stuff, because I mean, we're done with Thanos now, so we got to go beyond Thanos. Well, what's beyond Thanos? Deep space shit, Galactus, the Celestials, Silver Surfer, the Kree-Skrull War, the Eternals, and that's where we're headed. But I don't know. There was plans for a New Gods movie in the DCEU, the DC film franchise. But as we all know, we don't even know what the fuck's going on with that franchise anymore. Like, they fucking beat it into the ground, practically killed it. Then they did the Snyder Cut, which was reviewed very positively, but they've made it clear that, like, we're not reintroducing Zack Snyder's vision. We're not bringing that back. Yes, we allowed him to make the Snyder Cut. Yes, it was well received, but we're not going back to that plan. Maybe you should. And at the very least, I think with how successful the Snyder Cut was and how much people were like, ooh, Darkseid, Steppenwolf, it made all of that stuff better. You know, we saw Steppenwolf and the Parademons in the original version of Justice League, and we were all kind of like, whatever, what the fuck is this? But then we saw the Snyder Cut and we were like, Darkseid, Apocalypse, the New Gods, and now I'm kind of like, I want more of that. But I don't know, I think it's people's idea of like, they're both Jack Kirby's creations, they're his solo creations. Like I said, he did the base artwork and the writing, so they're his, both the Eternals and New Gods. And I think it's deep down, comic book fans recognize the Fourth World and the New Gods as more of like Kirby's big masterpiece, because they came first, you know, and the Eternals was an afterthought. Well, not an afterthought, but the Eternals was what he did second when he went back to Marvel. So to see the Eternals get a film adaptation before the New Gods, I think people are kind of like, it's along the lines of that whole, like, it's more of a disservice to Jack Kirby, but they're both great, and they both do what they do well. It's funny because, like, whereas the New Gods and the Fourth World was never really intended to be part of the main DC universe, people are clamoring for it to be part of the main DC universe and for them to make a DCEU movie of it. But then you get the Eternals, which was always intended to be part of the overall Marvel universe, and people are kind of like, whoa, Eternals? I don't know if we're ready. Shouldn't New Gods get their day in the light first? Maybe, but you know, the respective companies, they have to work with what they have to work with. Marvel, their shit is Eternals. It's not New Gods. So they're going to do Eternals and not New Gods. DC, what I'm saying is, don't get mad at Marvel for doing Eternals just because DC has chosen not to do New Gods. You know, that's on DC. And personally, I'd like to see movies of both. I'm very happy. I cannot wait to see Eternals when it comes out. I hope it's good. It's being made, directed by, I shouldn't say made, a lot of people work on movies, but it's being directed by the same director that did Nomadland, which is a good movie. It's an interesting movie. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but it's a good movie. So my hope is that with Eternals and where it stems from being part of Kirby's legacy, I hope that this movie is taken with the right amount of seriousness. Like, I know Marvel tends to have this very, like, comic, and I don't mean comic in, like, comic book way, I mean comic and, like, haha funny. They take this very jokey, lighthearted approach to their movies. There's like a formulaic way that they do it. I wouldn't mind them breaking the mold with Eternals. Eternals should be this grand, epic mythology. That's how it should be presented, because that's what it was meant to be. And I hope they go through with that. But yeah, for anyone who wants more knowledge on the Eternals and would like to kind of read some source material to, kind of know a little bit going into the Eternals movie, Jack Kirby's Eternals saga is a definite must read. But if you cannot suffer the old school writing, Neil Gaiman's updated take on the Eternals is also really good. My number one recommendation, though, is to read both. If you read both of these, I think you're going to go into the movie with enough background information on who they are, what their whole deal is, and you're going to be good to go. And you might even allow you to enjoy the movie a bit more. But who's to say? So, and Neil Gaiman is a great writer, a great fantasy writer. He wrote his own take on the Norse mythology, which is actually a pretty good take. Like, he doesn't take too many liberties with it, but he keeps the stories pretty true to what they always were. But this is his take on Norse mythology. And then anyone who's a fan of, like, you've seen the movie Stardust or read the book Stardust, he did that, and he's also famous for doing American Gods. So Neil Gaiman is a great fantasy fiction writer, and to have him brought in and do Eternals, I think was a good call. I think it was a really good call. If you wanted someone to do a big, grand, epic mythology, I think Neil Gaiman was the one to do it. So, yeah, that's my take on the Eternals, what I think about the movie, and what I think you guys should read to prep yourself for the movie. Let me know what you guys think. Leave some comments below. Get a discussion started. If you like what you saw here, please hit the like button. Maybe check out some of my other videos. Subscribe to the channel if you like. And other than that, I will see you guys next time.